"Mister, if they come, please hide my mom," the boy cried, and the silent rancher said, "Over my dead body." Wyoming Territory, late spring of 1877. The wind moved slowly through the valley, carrying with it the scent of dust, pine, and distant riverstone. The sun hung low behind the ridgeline, casting long shadows across the dry earth that surrounded a small, aging ranch. The land was quiet, too quiet, but that was how Harlan Thorne preferred it. He was up on the roof of the barn, one boot braced against the beam, hammer in hand, replacing warped shingles that had peeled away after a hard winter. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. His movements were steady, deliberate. Solitude had made him precise. Solitude had made him silent. Then he saw something. At first it was only a flicker in the corner of his eye, a blur against the golden grass. But when he turned, squinting into the light, his breath hitched. A child, a little boy no older than 5, stumbling toward the house from the southern slope. His tiny boots kicked up dirt as he dragged something behind him. Not something, someone. The boy was covered in grime, face strewn with tears and soil. His small hands clung to the limp wrist of a woman. His mother, who lay half-conscious, blood trailing from a gash across her temple. Her dress was torn, arms bruised, one shoe missing. She was barely breathing. The boy's legs buckled, but he kept moving, lips cracked, eyes glassy. Each step forward looked like it might be his last. Harlan dropped the hammer. He climbed down without a word, his boots hitting the ground hard. Dust curled around his ankles as he crossed the yard in long, fast strides. The boy saw him and froze. His lip trembled. "Mister," the boy whispered, voice barely audible. He looked up, eyes wide with something more than fear, something ancient, like grief passed down through blood. "If they come, please hide my mom." Harlan stopped 3 ft away, his jaw tightened. The silence that followed was full of heat and wind and unspoken memory. Then, wordlessly, he knelt. He placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him, then gently pried the woman's wrist from his grip. The boy did not resist. He swayed on his feet, swiping at his face. "Can you walk?" The boy nodded, but it was a lie. Harlan lifted the woman first, cradling her against his chest. Her head lulled back, dark hair sticky with blood. Then he reached down and scooped the boy up with one arm. The child was weightless, bones and skin and exhaustion. As he carried them across the yard, the sun dipped lower. The light turned amber, then red. The wind shifted, and the horses in the paddock stirred uneasily. Inside the cabin, it was cool and dim. Harlan kicked the door open with his boot, stepped inside, and gently laid the woman on the cot near the hearth. The boy clung to his sleeve, then collapsed onto the floor beside her, burying his face in her arm. Harlan stood there a moment, eyes on the child. He looked to the door, then to the battered woman lying unconscious, her chest rising slow and shallow. He could already feel what this meant, what was coming down that hill. What kind of man would leave a woman like that, and a child that desperate? His hand went to the rifle, leaning in the corner, but he did not reach for it yet. Instead, he stepped back and closed the door behind him, slow and firm, the wood groaning in the frame. He locked it. Then, with no one to hear him but the settling dust and the flicker of firelight, Harlan said quietly, more to himself than anyone, "Over my dead body." Harlan Thorne's cabin. Nightfall settled deep over the valley. The silence outside was thick, broken only by the creak of pine trees shifting in the wind. Inside, the fire cracked low in the stone hearth, casting a flickering amber glow that pushed the shadows back just far enough to feel safe for now. Rachel lay unconscious on the cot, her head resting on a folded quilt. The blood on her forehead had slowed, but the wound was deep and ugly. Harlan sat beside her, sleeves rolled, hands steady, cleaning the cut with a cloth soaked in boiled water and alcohol. The smell of whiskey and blood lingered in the air. He did not speak. He had never been one for words, especially not with strangers. But every movement he made was precise, careful, not because she was fragile, but because she had already been hurt enough. Tommy sat nearby, knees pulled to his chest, watching everything with wide, red-rimmed eyes. "Is Mama going to die?" he asked. His voice cracked on the last word. Harlan paused, glancing at the boy. The question hung between them like smoke. He did not answer right away. Instead, he reached for the needle and thread. "She's still breathing," he said at last. "That means she's still fighting." Tommy wiped his nose on his sleeve. She tried to keep running, but she was bleeding too much. She said, "Go find someone." And I said, "I can't leave you," but she told me to be brave. The boy's small hands trembled in his lap. He looked at Harlan again, his eyes shining with a kind of pleading no child should ever carry. If they come back, if they find her, she won't get up again. Harlan said nothing, but his jaw clenched. He turned back to Rachel and began to stitch. The thread pulled tight, clean through torn skin. She flinched slightly, even in sleep. He kept working until the wound was closed. The warmth of her presence settled between them like a blanket. They sat that way for a long time, letting the water speak for them. Eventually, Rachel said, "I do not know where you came from, Harlan Thorne, or what made you choose to live out here so far from the world." He did not turn. "But I know this much," she continued, her voice thick with something between gratitude and awe. "I am alive because of you." Harlan did not answer with words. He just nodded slightly, as if to accept her truth, but not claim it. She looked at him. Really looked. His profile was sharp against the light, but there was something softened in the way his shoulders sat, like the weight of all. Those lonely years had lifted just a little. There was no armor on him now, just a man, bruised and breathing, with enough strength left to protect more than himself. Tommy came running from "Mr. Harlan," he called, excited. They both turned. Tommy skidded to a stop in front of them, breathing hard. In his hand was a crumpled piece of paper, one of the old pages from Harlan's ledger. On it, drawn in the scrolled crooked lines of a child's hand, were 3 figures holding hands beneath a crooked house. A man, a woman, and a small boy. Tommy held it out with pride. "Does this look like our family?" Harlan took the paper slowly, caught off guard. He looked at the drawing, then at Tommy, then at Rachel. His hands trembled just a little, enough that he had to hold the page with both. A long breath escaped him, deep and uneven. Then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Harlan Thorne smiled. Not a smirk, not a reflex, a real smile, wide, warm, alive. He reached out and ruffled Tommy's hair. "Yeah," he said softly. "It does." The days that followed were slow and tender, like a wound beginning to heal. Sheriff Willard arrived 2 mornings after the fire, riding alone with a firm set to his jaw and a pair of iron cuffs in his saddlebag. He was older than Harlan by 10 years, weathered and upright, the kind of lawman who earned respect by never raising his voice. He said little when Harlan handed Elias over, but the look in his eyes said everything. Elias did not fight, not anymore. He was bound, bruised and silent, staring at the dirt as Willard tied him to the saddle horn. "You sure about this?" the sheriff asked, casting a glance toward the blackened barn. "Let the law carry it from here," Harlan replied. Willard nodded. "There's a place for folks like him. It ain't here." When they rode off, the air felt lighter. Rachel and Tommy stayed. No one spoke the decision aloud, but it hung in the air as plainly as smoke once had. Rachel made herself useful without being asked. She cleaned the soot from the walls, swept broken glass into a bucket, and cooked simple meals that filled the cabin with warmth. She planted new seeds. In the garden behind the house, her hands covered in dirt, her dress faded but clean. And Tommy, he bloomed. He laughed when he tripped, chased butterflies by the fence line, and followed Harlan around the property like a shadow. One morning, Harren found the boy curled up under the porch, fast asleep with a bundle of kindling in his arms. He said nothing, just carried him inside and tucked him under a blanket. He did not see her at first. He was focused, slow and steady, turning the block with reverence. She approached, standing silently behind him until he finally glanced up. "What are you making?" she asked. Harlan held up the object, a picture frame, still rough around the edges, but shaped with care. "It's for Tommy's drawing," he said, "the one with all of us." Rachel blinked, and for a moment, she could not breathe. It was such a small thing, and yet it was everything. She sat beside him, her voice soft and full. "Tommy needs a father." Harlan said nothing. Rachel turned toward him. "But I need something too, Harlan. I need a place I do not have to run from." He was saying it for the family he had chosen, and who had chosen him. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more unforgettable tales of love, loyalty, and redemption on the American frontier. Here, every story is a ride through raw emotion and quiet courage, where family is chosen and love is worth the fight. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a story, because in the Wild West, bullets missed, but hearts didn't. Thanks for watching, partner. We'll see you on the next trail.